real pleasure for me to be here. I don't know if there is enough chairs for everybody, but we won't take long here. So I will talk for 12 minutes, and after we'll say a few words, and we can open, uh, we can make a large group in our tradition, not with 1 hour and 30 minutes, but I think that as a whole we should be together with for 40 minutes, and then we go down and we have some the canapes and more wine. Okay?
Let me speak first.
Okay, please.
It's not really necessary to introduce you to Carla, but at any rate, that's my job and my role, so to say. And if I don't do it now, and I don't know what I'm going to do after she speaks, so let me have the pleasure of introducing her to you. And even though I would readily acknowledge that you don't need much introduction. Carla is now an old friend, but more formally, not everyone here knows that she is a sociologist, a psychoanalyst, and a group analyst from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, where she's had a very distinguished career, very active in professional organizations, university settings, and has written many things. Look, come in. Take a piece of carpet as well.
Yes.
Sit down. As you do know, she's an active member of the management committee of the Group Analytics Society International, and she's also been a co-chair of the group analysis section of the International Association of Group Psychotherapy. Now, I must confess, and it is a kind of confession, that my mind kind of turned to, of all people, Margaret Thatcher, who made it, not about you, but made a comment about Gorbachev, that here's a man with whom we can do business. And I thought to myself, if you get to know Carla Penna a bit, you realize very quickly, that here is a colleague with whom we can do business. And in the deepest sense, I've found that I can talk with her, speaking personally, about so many aspects of sociology, psychoanalysis, and group analysis. And it's an unusual combination, both in depth and in breadth, so I've enjoyed it enormously. But let me just read a few lines from my own foreword to this book. And the book is available downstairs, incidentally, in the gifts shop. Dr. Carla Penna has a highly developed appreciation of the well-known adage that the group and the individual are two sides of the same coin, and therefore that sociology and psychoanalysis should be deeply intertwined with group analysis. She understands the paradox in the statement that large groups are dynamic, open systems. She recognizes that insofar as in any group there is a war between the forces of regression and the forces of progression, studies of large groups are likely to emanate from the fields of both group relations and group analysis. As a psychoanalyst and group analyst, Carla keeps in mind the tripartite matrix of any particular group. This includes the personal and interpersonal matrices of the participants, at least in terms of role suction, valence, and personification. She knows how to play the popular children's game, Where is Wally? She is comfortable reading Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, so closer to home. I am large, I contain multitudes. She listened carefully when in 1958, a long time ago, The Rio de Janeiro Group Analytics Society was founded, and Walredo Ismael de Oliveira insisted, and I quote, "We must eliminate the barriers that arbitrarily separate the personal from the social." Though Carla knows that at the base of the Statue of Liberty in the harbor of New York, it is written, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore." In other words, she understands that the study of large social formations is inevitably a political project, even if not explicitly so. Now, moving to the very end of the book, let me quote from something that she has written. She is reminding us that a kind of psychohistorian or historian psychoanalyst, Didi Huberman, highlights the live firefly dance can take place only in the middle of the darkness, where it creates a dance of desire that forms a community of survival, a community of resistance. Therefore, from a more positive perspective, not a positivist perspective, Didi Huberman states that the ability to recognize a resistance in the smallest firefly becomes a light for all thought. She goes on to say, throughout Didi Huberman's book and work, actually, it is clear how the metaphor of the surviving fireflies describes precisely the relevance and meaning of the group analytic endeavor, from the heroic times at the Northfield Hospital to the contemporary large group experience. As different species of fireflies, group relations and group analytic professionals' attitudes and experiences, especially through large group work, represent sparkling lights of understanding and thinking to face the darkness before contemporary personal and social suffering. Now, almost as if daydreaming, Carla writes, we wonder if, like my human fireflies, we should develop a particular skill to illuminate the paths of persons, crowds, and masses in the darkness of the 21st century struggles. And I think that although that's the last sentence of your book, it's probably a good place for you to come
Yes,
in.
this is interesting because it was also the last sentence of my presentation. But the idea that we had today to innovate in a way this lounge and put everybody seated on the floor and together is because this, what I said in the end of the book, of the tiny fly of flies, that we could develop the bioluminescence and to uh, promote or make some difference in the world. This is what I wanted to say to you, and I'm really very glad that people from sociology, psychoanalysts from Brazil, psychoanalysts from London, colleagues from Italy came, people from the group relations traditions is here, people from the psychosocial are here, group analysts are here. So I like very much this dialogue between the transdisciplinary way, in transdisciplinary ways, because I always felt during the 40 years of my career, it's so boring when we keep repeating and repeating and repeating the same authors and studying the small lines of the same text. I hate it. I wanted to open these spaces. And this is, I'm really, really very glad that you are here with me. So I will say something about it, and then I will skip the end because this is. But I put it something else in the end.
If you can pronounce bioluminescence, be my guest.
Thank you for joining me today. I wouldn't be here if not for a multitude of masters, colleagues, and friends, some of them no longer with us, that believe in me, loved, fed, shared, and even heard me throughout my personal and professional life. You are alive in my internal group, and it's, it's really a multitude of persons. And I can't forget the joy that the last group analyst in Brazil from the old tradition, he told me, oh, all our colleagues, our masters will be delighted with you representing us at the Freud Museum. So I'm speaking on their behalf, and I think that I went all this path because I didn't want their words to be dead, and they are published in the beginning of my book, or took this Valderedo Ismael Oliveira, who was the translator of the first works of Freud in Brazil. So, for a psychoanalyst, launching a book at the Freud Museum is a dream coming true. I remember the day that, fascinated by listening about Freud's interpretation of the dream of Irma's injection, I decided to become a psychoanalyst. I was 18 at the time. 2 years later, while working with disabled patients, I spontaneously joined a few of them, sitting on the veranda for talk. That was my first wild group. The staff supervisor, who is somebody from the British Psychoanalytic Society, today he moved to the UK, reflected on my initiative in the context of that rehabilitation organization through a metaphor. I didn't understand the meaning of his words. I was only 20. But they remained registered in my mind ever since. He said, oh, you are an economist with a tie. I had never understood what it meant in the context of that organization. But ever since, it's a riddle that never the Sphinx deciphered. 40 years later, from crowd psychology to the dynamics of large groups, celebrates other passion, which, almost as a riddle, starts with Freud's words in group psychology and analysis of the ego, when he challenged the opposition between individual and social psychology, confirming the idea that individual psychology is connected to the context in which the individual is embedded. Freud's work on the masses highlights the links that binds the individual and the social, and necessarily involves the other as a model, as an object, as a helper, as an opponent. Freud offered us a new starting point to explore psychoanalysis and culture, combining the interpretation of individual and social processes and trying to position himself exactly where their essential imbrication is. This intrinsic interdependence took years to be understood and acknowledged in psychoanalysis, even today. No? However, over the last 70 years, perhaps 80, by combining psychoanalysis and sociology, Fuchs and group analysis have been enabling the exploration of interpersonal, and transpersonal figurations in groups, and figurations we owe to Norbert Elias, who was an author that I developed a passion before joining the Group Analytic Society, and I think that it was all rather an abstract, and I was mentioning Elias and said, what this lady from Brazil was saying about Elias. And I never knew that Elias was co-founder of the society. But I found him in a bookstore when I was very young, and I said, wow, this man says important things about groups, and I started to read him. The transformative context of the 60s and the 70s conferred a new zeitgeist on development in group work. The impetus inherited from the Northfield experiments, combined with new social cultural perspectives, favored innovations in healthcare that led to advances in group practice, especially the development of work in large groups. In 65, Lionel Krieger and Patrick DeMatti established a new culture in ward and community meetings through works in groups. In 66, they started to convene large groups at the Hollywood Hospital. In the early days, large group work was underdeveloped and not integrated in one single perspective. Moreover, group analytic and group relations perspectives overlapped. By that time, group relations professionals were involved in the development of Leicester conferences and the A.K. Rice Institute in the US, underpinning the learning about leadership in groups. In their framework, they included experiences in large groups. In parallel, members of the Group Analytic Society in London were working in large groups in day hospitals, wards, therapeutic communities, and community meetings. The first large group cohort in group analysis, according to Mr. Wilk, was influenced by a mixture of Freudian, Kleinian, Bionian, and Foucaultian theoretical perspectives. However, whereas the group relations field grounded in Bionian group theories built a more structured and unified frame for the work, in group analysis, there never was just one single group analytic approach to large group work. Despite their differences, these pioneers cherished a kind of group analytic spirit. One day I would like to understand more why these both siblings that were born in Northfield work so differently and so distantly. I always think that if we could work more together, it would be marvelous. If we could integrate more, even respecting the differences between group relations and group analysis. Although Pichon Rivière, José Bleher, and others attempted to apply operative groups to a whole city in 1958, known as Rosario Experience, large group work remained unknown among Latin American group analysts. During a group analytics symposium in Dublin, I participated in a large group session, and a new passion sparkled in me. I immediately realized the potential of large group for self-study and learning from experience about socially unconscious processes, as well as observing the emergence of power relations, struggles for leadership, polarization, and subgrouping. Later, through Pat DeMare, I learned that a large group offers a structure or a medium for linking the inner world with the social cultural dimensions in which interpersonal relationships take place. Large groups undeniably trigger strong emotions and frustrate libidinal needs by eliciting primitive and psychotic mechanisms, as Krieger, Turquet, Hopper, and others have investigated extensively. However, almost paradoxically, large group work creates safe spaces for collective self-reflection, transforming the unconscious collective processes that had previously been displayed as thoughtless behavior in 19th century crowds or blind followership in the 20th century totalitarian masses, and unfortunately right now in so many places of the world, into new forms of thinking and dialogue for persons and communities. In this sense, it became clear to me that large group work is a theoretical and technical research tool to broaden the contemporary understanding of the psychodynamics of persons when gathered in large numbers. Thus, intertwining riddles and passions with curiosity and an inquiring spirit, I developed my transdisciplinary research on the history of social formations, ranging from the 19th century crowd psychology in France and 20th century Freudian mass psychology, including developments in critical theory, to the study of the psychodynamics of contemporary large groups. My book revisits the epistemological basis of group analysis by introducing and discussing its historical path, especially in connection with the study of large groups and investigations of the social unconscious. It also explores the early work on group relations and contemporary research on the basic assumption group, particularly Hopper's theory of incohesion, aggregation, massification. Today, large group work seems crucial. This is what I wanted to tell you, because to me this is something that is really meaningful. Large group work seems crucial to face contemporary challenges by fostering dialogue in communities. Yet, given the huge contemporary socio-economic and psychosocial hardships, for some, the idea of working with large groups leads to ambivalence and disbelief in the possibility of using the large group as a tool to transform relationships among a large number of persons. Indeed, the idea of learning from experience in large groups or developing a koinoniac spirit seems to be just a little sparkle of togetherness amidst the uncertain fellowship witnessed in the increasing incohesion processes of the 21st century. And this is serious because we are living in very hard times. At this point, considering the war in Europe and the transformation triggered by COVID-19, we wonder if the fellowship and the dialogue envisaged by large group work will find the strength to face the struggle posed by today's words. And then it was the moment to close the book, and I couldn't finish it because I was asking myself what I'm going to say after almost 150 years of the large group social formations, what I'm going to say to people. And then I found this book from D.D. Uberman, translated in English only in 2018. The name is Survival of the Fireflies. And then I found the concluding comments for the book. And then I say, in order to do so, it seems necessary to find in a reconded and some almost forgotten area of the soul a space to develop, such as Hopper states, enduring creativity, transcendent imagination, and mature hope to deal with the riddles of life. Because I have to confess, it's being very difficult right now to think on hope. To find this inner space, I sought inspiration in Pier Paolo Pasolini's visit to the 26th canto of Dante's Inferno, where the poet noticed the tiny light from fireflies. He says, the poet is observing the 80 Boglia of hell, a political Boglia if ever there was one, since we can recognize a few eminent citizens of Florence gathered there, all under the same condemnation as evil counselors. In this outspoken article, The Vacuum of Power, initially published in 1975, Pasolini analyzes the decline of old fascism and the rise of progressive neo-fascism in Italy in the 60s and the 70s. To develop his critique, Pasolini used a metaphor that disappearance of fireflies from the fields in Italy due to air pollution. Years later, Didi Huberman, based on Pasolini's metaphor, wrote The Survival of Fireflies to discuss the importance of the survival of experience as a form of political resistance in dark times. And he has a quotation. And then we might imagine that, but he says, but first, have the fireflies truly disappeared? Have they all disappeared? Do they still emit, but from where, their wondrous intermittent signals? Do they still seek each other out somewhere, speak to each other, love each other in spite of all the machine, in spite of a murky night, in spite of the fierce spotlights? We might imagine that because of their fragility, their passing pulsating light, the fireflies would be certainly condemned to disappear. However, as Didi Huberman highlights, the live firefly dance can take place only in the middle of the darkness, where it creates a dance of desire that forms a community of survival, a community of resistance. Therefore, as Didi Huberman states, the ability to recognize a resistance in the smallest firefly becomes a light for all thought. Throughout Didi Huberman's book, it's clear how the metaphor of the surviving fireflies describes precisely the relevance and the meaning of the group endeavor, from the heroic times at Northfield to the contemporary large group experiences. I would say that group analytic professionals' attitudes and experiences, as well group relations experiences, especially through large group work, represent sparkling lights of understanding and thinking to face the darkness before contemporary personal and social suffering. Almost as if daydreaming, repeating what Earl said, but with a small thing. I wonder if, like tiny human fireflies, supported by from crowd psychology to the dynamic of large groups reflections, because it's only reflections, we can build from each chapter, we can build a lot together, I hope. We can become stronger and develop a bioluminescence skill to illuminate the darkness of 21st century struggle. As Freud said in his recorded speech to BBC in 1938, as you know, the only record of his voice, when referring to the discovery of the unconscious and the unrelating resistance. Our friends, the struggle is not yet over. Thank you for coming and joining.
You know, not everybody knows that Norbert Elias was very interested in and for a while preoccupied with the sociology, his style of sociology, of the dance. And the concept of figuration and later configuration came out of his study of the dance and reminded Dance of Desire and the Dance of the Fireflies of, for example, Morris Nitzan's new paintings, which will be available in the book later this month. Well, it's already published, of the figurations of the dance. Each firefly flashing, but in a meaningless way without the other in the embrace. That's the sort of thing that Carla is exploring.
Well, I know that the place is not so comfortable for everybody, so I'm sorry for that. There's no chairs for everybody, but it's open. That's why I said this very small, large group, because the time is, can be. So we can say whatever we wish. We can talk for, I think that 30 minutes maximum, or 20 minutes, because we have some cocktail and some drinks downstairs.